Hi, welcome to Spoiler Lab. A boy visits a mysterious island inhabited by a girl, whose body is lighter than air, so she must be tied by a rope for her not to fly into the sky. Today we will recap the story of the 2016 movie Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Jake is putting adult diapers on the supermarket shelf as his classmate Emmy approaches. The guy awkwardly tries to start a conversation with the pretty girl, but she gives him a judgmental look and turns her attention to her friends. The teens toss diaper packs back and forth and mess up Jake's carefully arranged products. Jake receives a call from his father asking him to urgently visit his grandfather Abraham, who suffers from dementia. To avoid an awkward conversation with his colleague, Shelley, during the ride, Jake calls his grandfather. Alarmed, the man asks his grandson not to visit him, as it can be very dangerous. After learning that his son took the key to the gun cabinet, the man hangs up. In the evening, driving up to the old man's house, Shelley almost runs over a strange man who appeared out of nowhere right in the middle of the road. The stranger followed the car with his white eyes, which alarmed the travelers. Entering his grandfather's house, Jake finds the inside of it in a complete mess. All things are scattered on the floor, and the doors are knocked down. The guy runs outside and warns his colleague about the break-in. All of a sudden, Jacob sees a faint glow among the trees in the backyard. He moves closer to the light source and discovers a flashlight with bloodstains and a metal net torn to shreds. Wanting to figure out what happened, the guy goes further into the backyard, where he discovers Abraham's lifeless body. Turning the old man on his back, Jake is horrified to discover that his grandfather has empty eye sockets. He has a fork firmly clamped in his hands, which he desperately used to defend himself from someone. Frightened, Jake tries to call an ambulance when his grandfather grabs his arm. He asks his grandson to go to Cairnum Island and find a loop with the date September 3, 1943. It all sounds like a bunch of gibberish to Jake, and he concludes that his grandfather has gone completely bonkers. But the old man assures him that he will soon understand everything and says that the bird will explain it all. Abraham makes his grandson promise him to fulfill his last request and passes away, before the ambulance arrives. Without having time to process what has just happened, Jake notices a faceless 2-meter-tall monster in a suit standing among the trees. The creature starts slowly approaching the guy, but Shelley comes running to his aid and fires several shots into the air. After this incident, Jake believes that he is going crazy, so he decides to get treatment by Dr. Golan for a month. The guy tells the doctor about his grandfather's many stories about the incredible monsters he stumbled upon during World War II. Mrs. Golan assures the patient that the monster he saw in Abraham's yard was just a figment of his imagination. The guy has a hard time believing it, as he is sure that the thing that attacked his grandfather wasn't human. Jake plunges into his childhood memories, where his grandfather tells him about an island in Puerto Rico that has a lake with glowing water. According to Abraham, that was the place where he hid from monsters during the war. The guy recalls that he always felt special and wanted to change the world when he was spending time with his grandfather. His thirst for adventure was suppressed by his pragmatic parents who convinced him that his actions wouldn't change anything. His grandpa, on the contrary, immersed little Jake in a fairy tale world. He recalls the times when Abraham, before going to bed, would show him old photographs and tell the legend of the boy Abe, who lived in a beautiful orphanage on the island of Cairnum. It was run by the headmistress, Miss Peregrine, who liked to smoke a pipe and turn into a bird. Moreover, children with peculiar abilities also resided there. For example, a couple of friends Bronwyn and Victor, who together were stronger than several grown men. Or Hugh, who had a swarm of bees in his stomach. And of course dear Emma, who was lighter than air and wore special cast iron shoes so she wouldn't fly into the sky like a balloon. Abraham turned out to be Abe, and he used to live among these peculiar children in the orphanage. At the end of the tale, his grandfather would always frighten his grandson with stories about faceless monsters with long arms and tentacles that came to Poland many years ago. Jake also remembers the consequences of his blind faith in his grandfather's fairy tales. At school, classmates would make fun of him after hearing his stories. Over time, the boy started to have doubts about the truthfulness of these stories, which he shared with his grandfather. Jake's father told him that Abraham had bought the photographs of peculiar children at a flea market, and Poland had been attacked not by monsters, but by monstrous people. The grandfather was upset by his grandson's words, but instead of making excuses, he simply hugged him. In the present, Jake wakes up to strange noises outside his window. In the morning, he and his father go to Abraham's house to pick up his things. Despite his son's protests, his father urges him to leave. The man admits that the old man was a wonderful grandfather, but a useless father who went on business trips too often. Jake comes home to his surprise birthday party. The guy hides from the annoying guests in his room, when he gets a parcel addressed to him that was found in his grandfather's belongings. In the parcel, he finds a book of essays and a postcard depicting the island. On the back, he finds a message from Miss Peregrine, who is waiting to hear from Abe. The guy shows the card to Dr. Golan and tells her that he needs to talk to Miss Peregrine to find answers to all his questions and improve his state of mind. He persuades his father to go to Cairnham Island so he can get inspired to write his new book. After reaching the place, the father and son check into the hostel. Jake talks his dad into going to the beach to bird watch for his book while he goes to the orphanage alone. Franklin agrees and gives a couple of bills to some local teenagers to escort his son to the right place. They bring him to the edge of the forest. He discovers the remains of a destroyed orphanage right behind it. Jake learns from an old hostel guest that the orphanage was destroyed by the Germans during the World War II. Neither the children nor Miss Peregrine survived the air attack. The guy lies to his father about going for a walk with the local guys and decides to come back to the orphanage. He explores every room, taking in the grim atmosphere of the ruined lives. All of a sudden, Jake notices a figure of a girl in the distance. She calls him Abe. The guy gets scared and runs out of the shelter, but stumbles and falls. When he wakes up, he realizes that the little girl is carrying him somewhere on her shoulders. She drops him near the entrance to the cave, where the other peculiar children are standing. Delighted, he recognizes in them the characters from his grandfather's stories: Emma, the twins, Olivia, baby Bronwyn and the invisible Millard. Jake tries to process what is happening, because all these children supposedly have long died during bombing. However, they deny their death and invite Jake to follow them into the loop. Emma tells him that Miss Peregrine saw him earlier and told the children to bring him to her. Confused, the guy follows the peculiar children into the cave. But at the last moment, he decides to run away and returns to the hostel. Instead of the hostel, he finds himself inside a pub, where he meets people dressed in suits from the last century. They look at Jake with suspicion and take him for a spy. The guests decide to finish him off, but Millard interferes. As the invisible naked boy throws dishes at people, Olivia drags Jake outside. Dozens of fighter jets fly overhead, bombarding the island. Together with the rest of the children, he jumps into a wagon that takes them back to the orphanage. Jake can't believe his eyes. His grandfather's stories are true. From his new acquaintances, he learns that he ended up in a time loop that took him to September 3, 1943. On the porch of the intact orphanage, Jake is greeted by the elegant Miss Peregrine with a pipe in her hand. She escorts the guy inside and says that he arrived at exactly 13 minutes past 5, as she expected. With sadness in her voice, she also tells the guest that she guessed about Abe's passing, otherwise he would have told her about his grandson's arrival beforehand. They go out into the yard, where Miss Peregrine introduces Jake to other children and talks about their special abilities. Because of their peculiarities, they are forced to live far from other people to not be persecuted. She herself is in Brine, a woman who can turn into a bird and loop time. Her loop allows you to restart the last 24 hours of your life and relive them all over again. During the day, each of the peculiar children performs a certain function to keep the house in order. A police officer comes to the shelter because of the fight in the pub. Jake takes the blame, which pleases Emma. When they are alone, the girl asks him to help her return the squirrel to the hollow, as it falls down every day at the same time. Jake ties a rope around Emma's waist, and Emma takes off her cast iron shoes and soars up to the very top of the tree. As she returns the squirrel to its place, the girl says that Abe helped her before. From her voice, the guy understands that they used to be close in the past. Emma invites Jake to dinner and suggests him to change into more appropriate clothes in Abe's room. The guy decides to talk with Enoch first, who is a bit unfriendly to him because he is jealous of his relationship with Emma. He advises Jake to forget about the girl, because she swore to never fall in love again after her heart had been broken. To Olivia's exclamations of admiration, Enoch implants human organs into puppets. They come to life and, on his orders, begin to fight among themselves until one of them rips out the opponent's heart. In the evening, all the residents of the orphanage gather at one table for dinner. Hugh accidentally releases a swarm of bees, but immediately fixes the situation by putting a net on his head. Little Fiona sticks a piece of chicken into the huge mouth at the back of her head. The kids ask Jake what's peculiar about him and he sheepishly admits that he doesn't have any special abilities. The children ask their guest to stay with them in the loop forever. Enoch sarcastically says that Jake will do the same thing as his grandfather and stay in the future so he can start a family and grow old. These words infuriate Emma and she leaves the table. Miss Peregrine invites the children to watch a movie. Horace projects his dreams using his eye as a projector. He usually dreams about clothes, but last time he had a prophetic dream about Jake's arrival. Suddenly, the picture changes and the white-eyed people in suits appear, who take an elderly woman in shackles away. The dream changes again and the audience sees Emma and Jake getting closer to each other as if they were about to kiss. Miss Peregrine asks Horace to stop the show and invites the guests to attend the restart of the loop. All the kids go out on a rainy street and Miss Peregrine starts a record with cheerful music. At her command, everyone puts on gas masks and, exactly on time, the sounds of shelling roll in the sky. The children are fascinated as they watch enemy fighter jets fly over their house and drop bombs down. A second before the bomb hits the ground, Miss Peregrine presses the stopwatch and everything freezes. She moves the arrows back 24 hours and the whole group is transported to the evening of September 2, 1943. Witnessing this incredible event, Jake decides to return to the present and takes a letter from his grandfather, which he addressed to Miss Peregrine. Emma takes the guy to the cave, and he takes a selfie with her before he leaves. Visibly upset, the girl tells Jake that he will be able to start a family outside the loop, while she will live the same day forever. Their conversation is interrupted by a wounded winebrine that flies into the cave. Emma decides to take her to the orphanage and tells Jake to leave. Back in 2016, Jake sees that someone took the lives of a flock of sheep and a man, whose eyes were missing. The locals decide that it was Jake who did it, and he has to confess to his father that he spent the whole day in the orphanage. After that, Franklin decides to keep his eyes on his son at all times. From his grandfather's last letter, Jake learns about other loops and decides to return to the home for peculiar children. After waiting for his father to fall asleep, the guy goes through the time loop again. He asks Miss Peregrine about Mr. Barron, who was mentioned in his grandfather's letter. The guy worries that Abe has dealt with dangerous people while traveling through the loops, but Miss Peregrine drops the conversation. Despite the protests of the other children, Enoch brings Jake to Victor's room for answers. He revives Victor's lifeless body and uses it as a puppet to scare the guest. Later, on a walk, the guy tries to find out from Emma what happened to Victor and whether people with white eyes could have killed him. Instead of giving him the answers, the girl invites him to a boat trip. In the middle of it, she throws herself into the water. Frightened that the girl will drown, Jake rushes after her. In the water, he realizes that this is the only place where Emma can feel free without being afraid to fly away. She brings him to the sunken ship and demonstrates her ability to control the air. The girl gives Jake Abe's things, among which he finds photographs of the people with white eyes. In one of the photos, he recognizes the man he saw near his grandfather's house. Emma reveals that Abe dedicated his life to hunting down these dangerous things but in the end chose to leave the orphanage to protect his grandson. Later, the girl shows Jake Miss Peregrine, who shoots with a crossbow at a 2-meter monster that looks similar to what he saw earlier. It turns out that these creatures are invisible and only Abe was able to see them, and Jake inherited this feature from him. Upon learning of his gift, Miss Peregrine decides to tell him the truth. It turns out that all these years Abe has been preparing his grandson to travel through the loops. Once upon a time, a split occurred among people with special abilities. One part of them, led by Barron, decided to live outside the time loops and gain immortality by taking away the ability to control time from an winebrine. However, the experiment on the winebrine turned them into monsters, the Hollows. Since then, they have only been able to regain their human form by devouring the eyes of other people, especially children. Meanwhile, the wounded winebrine Miss Avocet wakes up and reveals that her home for peculiar children was destroyed by the Hollows and that she was the only one who managed to survive. Barron plans to run another experiment using several winebrines at once. Realizing that her children are in danger, Miss Peregrine tells them to pack their things to create a new time loop. Jake is faced with a choice, to go with them or return to 2016, but then he will never see the peculiar children again. The guy returns to the present and learns about the mysterious passing of one of the hostile guests, who also lost his eyes. A visiting ornithologist, John Lemon, tells the locals about a blind man who came to the island on the same ferry as him. Hearing this, Jake returns to the cave to warn his friends about the danger. The ornithologist follows him and finds out the location of the entrance to the time loop. He tells the young man that he is Barron himself, and that he previously turned into his psychiatrist Golan. Taking Jake hostage, Barron arrives at the home for peculiar children and demands that Peregrine surrender to him for his second experiment to gain immortality. To save Jake, she agrees to sacrifice herself. She says goodbye to the children and locks them in the living room with Miss Avocet, who is also hiding. After Miss Peregrine turns into a bird, Barron puts her in a cage. Jake plans to fight back against the Hollow that has arrived shortly after Barron. The children block all entrances to the house and arm themselves. Suddenly, Miss Avocet is attacked by an invisible Hollow. Jake takes her crossbow and tries to aim at the monster when it grabs Enoch. In the end, the guy manages to shoot the Hollow and the children run out, locking the monster in the living room. But there is no one else to restart the loop now, so the bomb is going to fall on the house, and the time loop is going to close forever. The peculiar children, led by Jake, head to the beach to catch up with Barron and Miss Peregrine. With the help of her powers, Emma lifts the ship from the bottom and sends it forward. In the time loop atlas, Jake discovers that Ms. Avocet's loop was created as recently as 2016. Emma tells Jake that, without the loop, all peculiar children are in danger of being affected by the present flow of time, as they would all grow old quickly. The only way to save them is to get rid of Baron and reset the loop back to 1943 with the help of the Weinbrins. Then, Jake will be able to stay in 2016 with his grandfather, as his fate will also change with the death of Baron. However, the guy isn't sure anymore whether he wants to live in the present, because he has feelings for Emma. The teens get closer for a kiss, but their romantic moment is ruined by Enoch and the other kids. Jake tells them that Miss Avisette's time loop is due to close at 5 p.m., so he will need Enoch's help to rescue the kidnapped Weinbrins and survive the hollow encounter. The ship arrives at the amusement park where the passage from 1943 to 2016 is located. Jake, Emma and Millard go through the portal in the haunted house and head to Blackpool Tower, where Baron and his henchmen are hiding. The friends discover that there are only 4 hollows in the basement, and not all villains are there yet. Emma rises into the air, drawing Baron's attention to herself. The girl hints that they have taken one of his friends hostage and demands to bring Miss Peregrine and the other Weinbrins to the pier for an exchange. This amuses Baron a lot and he orders his 2 henchmen and the hollows to deal with the kids. Jake leads the floating Emma outside, which startles the people passing by. The rope gets tangled up in the electric wires and the train rushes towards her. The guy manages to free Emma from captivity, while the train hits one of the white-eyed villains. The second henchman and the hollows follow the children. Jake gives a signal to Enoch and the rest of the kids are transported to 2016. They attack the enemy with snowballs that stick to the hollows, making them visible to the rest. Emma throws cotton candy at the monsters using air, making them even more material. After that, Enoch's animated skeletons enter the battle and simultaneously attack the hollows. With their help, the children manage to defeat the opponents and they set out to help the Weinbrins. As Baron complains to the henchmen about doing all the villainous work for them, the kids sneak into the tower unnoticed and take their positions. With the force of air, Emma pins the villain to the knife-throwing disc while Hugh attacks his minions with a swarm of bees. One of the villains transforms into a half-mouse and starts throwing knives at the children. Emma loses control of Baron. As the kids battle the white-eyed villains with their powers, Jake and Emma go after their leader. The girl distracts Baron while Jake frees the Weinbrins, but Baron still catches up to him and steals his appearance. The rest of the kids manage to deal with the villains, but the villains freeze Olivia first. Enoch confesses his feelings to her and kisses her, which returns warmth to her body. Emma and Enoch can't figure out which Jake is the real one. But the original one realizes that he can use his ability to see the hollows. He points to one of them, and the hollow grabs Baron and rips out his eyes, thinking it's Jake. The villain dies, and Enoch shoots the last hollow with a crossbow. Jake says goodbye to the peculiar children as they travel with the wounded Miss Peregrine to 1943 before the loop closes. He himself must stay in 2016 to reunite with his grandfather. Before they part ways, Emma tells Jake that now they no longer need to be constantly saved from monsters, because thanks to him they have gained faith in their own abilities. Abraham gives his grandson a new map and advises him to find his place with the peculiar children. Jake travels the world, moving from one loop to another. He finally makes it to the ship before sailing, where he is reunited with Emma and friends. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you liked the video please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.